Welcome back to the New York Gun Guys podcast. My name is John.
My name is Taylor.
Taylor.
Yeah, man.
What are we talking about today?
Oh, man. Well,
there's a lot going on.
There is a lot going on.
Jesus, there's a lot going on. All right.
I think the name of this one is going to be called Civil Unrest and You.
Yeah. We kind of just wanted to touch a little bit on, like, these. I mean, I guess it's not really happening so much here in New York yet. As far as this latest shooting in where was it, in Wisconsin?
Yeah.
It might be coming.
It might.
You know.
More importantly, I was talking with John the other day. I'm like, we really need to talk about what could happen in New York, what we could do maybe to prevent ourselves from becoming victims to these things, and how possibly firearms in the New York scene could, help protect you in self-defense scenario.
Yeah. So I messaged Taylor and I said, it might be worth talking about this kid, Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah.
And he was kind of like, yeah, well, it's not really New York specific, and I agree, it's not. It's more national news, I think.
But the scenario
can absolutely happen here.
Right.
So we're not going to dive too much into his exact situation. We're not going to go over Wisconsin law. We don't know Wisconsin law.
Right.
And honestly, I don't have enough time to actually look through, statute by statute to try and figure out exactly what he's guilty of, not guilty of. There's plenty of videos out there you can Google, and you can get very well-known YouTubers who go over it, like, step by step and what they think. And yeah, I mean, there's people that I just saw that they're going over it with, like, the audio file so they can see when exactly the rounds went off. We're not doing that.
Yeah. My take on it is that the situation is absolutely relatable to what could happen to somebody living in New York.
Right, it could happen.
Right. And that's the big thing, that we find ourselves looking at these situations Monday morning quarterback style saying, well, he could have done this, he could have done this, he could have done this. But what could have been done possibly to prevent this? Right.
And just to give everybody a little background, what exactly is going on with him? There was that shooting that happened with the police officers. They shot the gentleman in the car. And we're not going to go over that either, because there's just, quite frankly, there's just not enough information.
Well, there's new stuff coming out every day, it seems.
Who even knows if that's reliable?
Exactly.
Because, a lot of this stuff is
changes.
like, I'm seeing things, and I'm just scrolling through, and I'm not looking for anything, but I'm just scrolling through stuff, and you see, like, breaking news, like, the officers said this and that, and it's like, well, that's just a post somewhere, like, it's not.
There's no official. Yeah, there's no official narrative yet put out.
So until there's an official narrative on anything, I would really recommend everybody out there, don't get sucked into the, he's wrong or he's right, or police are killing X, Y, and Z people at a rate that's. Look, just take a step back, take a deep breath. All right, slow down, let it run its course. The information will be out. It will come out eventually. There'll be body cam footage of everything. So just hold on.
Speaking of, one interesting fact I looked up a few days ago, which I hadn't told you yet, it just kind of popped into my mind, was that it is true that young black males are disproportionately killed more than white males by police, but the overall number of white males killed by police are higher. The only reason...
You're talking by population.
Yes, by population.
Right.
So black males make up a lower population than white males.
Of course.
But in terms of the percentage of shootings per population, black men are shot disproportionately higher than white men. But the number of white men are killed more by police. So
but then you also
gets
have
into
to
this narrative
of course it does.
They say that these people are killed more. Well, it's like the numbers say this, but it's like two people just like butting heads. But ultimately, it's a moot point, because disproportionately killed and the actual numbers killed, it doesn't. You could spin it any way you want.
I mean, you could say by population that one group is killed more, or use of force is used greater on that group of people. But then you also have to take into factor on the people who are committing these crimes. And I know that there are
encounters with police.
Yeah, right. And I know that there's a lot of people who will throw out the stat that, a certain group of people commit, 50% more of the crime. And I, you can kind of look into it that way, and it could be true. I don't know if it's quite 50%. I also heard some lower numbers like 33% and stuff like that. But I mean, that's also an argument too. I mean, if there's one group of people who are committing more of the crime out there, then they're going to have just
more
it makes sense. They're going to have more
police.
interactions with police, right?
It could often be more violent interactions,
Could
more
be.
people
Could
with
be.
histories and warrants.
Could be, exactly.
But moving...
But just, I we don't want to stick on this too long, because this is really not what we're talking about today, and it's not something that we want to talk about anyway.
Right.
Because it's a bigger situation, and we're not here to say, not believe one side or believe the other side. We're not really interested in that at all.
I like to say that I'm more impartial to things, that I try and look at it from just an overall
of course.
situation, because I don't want to see anybody dead at the end of the day. And I don't think that anybody really needs to die.
Right. I mean I've been there when people have gotten shot. I have a story for you after this, but it's crazy, man. Yeah. It's crazy when you roll up on a scene and someone was just been shot, and they're saying to you, like, I've been shot, like, don't let me die, like, it gets to you. I've been there recently, and it's scary stuff, man. Like, you're surrounded by people, and you don't know if the guy who shot this guy is standing right next to you, and people want to film, and
it's chaotic.
It is, and people have the right to film, but they don't have the right to be right up on top of you. But they don't really care about that.
No.
People don't care about the law, especially if they're there, and, like, let's say that is your friend, and you want to help them just as much. But
somebody's yelling World Star in the background.
I mean, it happens. I mean, it's funny because that's kind of like a thing people joke about, like World Star, but, like, that's real life. I mean, I've been on the scene where people are screaming World Star, but that's a discussion for another day.
So, John, what can somebody do ultimately to ensure their safety?
Yeah, well, let's start out by saying just like a quick overview of what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse. So, I don't know if you want to talk about it a little bit.
From what I've heard. Now, people say, he traveled out of state to go there. It was like a half hour. It was like right over the border. It's like, driving to work. Let's just say.
I mean, that's shorter than most people's commute to work. Right. But at the end of the day, due to the letter of the law, that is technically crossing state lines.
It is. And honestly, from the videos that I've seen them interviewing him, he said he was here to provide first aid, to help people. He's going to run into harm's way in order to help people, and he brought the rifle for self-protection.
Right. He also
was there to protect his business, which I find issue with. Because honestly, if you got no skin in the game, if that's not your business and you're not paid to be there, some people, they use the term vigilante. I don't think it applied in this sense, but I don't think it's a good idea.
Right. And now we're not saying that the actual shooting that involved Kyle Rittenhouse is wrong.
No.
That's a whole separate issue than him just being there in the first place. I think that there was no legitimate reason at this point. There was probably no legitimate reason for him to be there, right? It's not his business.
Right.
It's not his family's business. He was not hired by the business for protection of the business. So there's a lot of, it's kind of like you kind of walked into, you just like those people who are rioting and burning down businesses and attacking people shouldn't have been there.
Right.
He probably shouldn't have been there either.
And ultimately, if he wasn't there, he wouldn't have been in this situation.
Correct.
I think that's the biggest takeaway is that
don't put
yourself in harm's way.
Right. And just as he wouldn't be in the situation if he wasn't there, well then the people who got shot, who were killed, they also wouldn't be shot and wouldn't be killed if they weren't there. So we're not saying that one side is right, one side is wrong, and Kyle shouldn't have been there, and everybody shouldn't have been there.
Exactly. The whole situation could have been really avoided. And that gets into something that I think is the most important thing. Don't put yourself in harm's way.
Right.
If you got, John and I are a little older than this kid. And I say kid, when I was 17, I would do dumb shit. And
of course.
Just to get attention and all that.
Yeah, of course.
But, looking back now on, let's just say, the mentality of a teenager, technically 17, he's a teenager.
Right.
We have the wisdom of knowing, hey, don't do that.
Yeah, you kind of have a better view of the world the older you get, as a lot of you who are listening realize. Maybe at 17, if there was some crazy shit going on that we felt very passionate about, and don't get me wrong, Taylor and I do feel passionately about things that are going on.
Right.
We do have opinions, but we're also old enough to realize that there's more important things going on in our own lives. We have families, we have little ones on the way, and sometimes it's just not smart as much as we want to go out and help a certain side of the cause, it's just not smart to be putting yourself in that situation.
Right. I can't help my family if I'm shot
Or in
arrested.
jail, right?
Even if it was totally justified for me, defending myself or business or property.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Which kind of rolls into, just because you mentioned the self-defense aspect, Kyle was there defending property, whatever, and then, going in to help people who were injured, and then he got into, it looked like an altercation with a gentleman.
Yeah.
Who then attacked. It looked like, from the video that I saw, it looks like there was that Kyle might have been the primary aggressor. And
right.
The primary aggressor is someone who starts a conflict. But he then retreated, and he was running away.
Yeah, so Colleen Noir put out a really good video about this.
Yeah, I highly recommend watching that.
Definitely. I mean, Colleen Noir is a lawyer, and he breaks down, certain things like Kyle was the initial aggressor, but since he then retreated and the other guy was chasing him, that guy becomes the aggressor.
Right.
He stated that the aggressor can change in the blink of an eye, depending on the situation.
Right.
So the video is kind of not the best in that first instance, but Kyle was running away and this guy was chasing after him.
Right.
And, somebody's chasing after you and throwing stuff at you and was saying before threatening you, saying threatening things.
Right.
It stands to reason that would be a self-defense scenario.
Right.
Now, the part that I find interesting is a lot of people say, oh, well, afterwards he called somebody and said he killed somebody and then ran away. Well, probably because he was trying to retreat to get to a better position of defense, of, hey, all these people are coming after me. I called somebody to say I killed them. I got to get somewhere safe so I can maybe call the cops or maybe, try and just get my head clear for a sec.
Yeah.
And then the second part of the video, which is the most, I think, well documented, of him running down the street, people chasing after him.
Right.
He's shooting the people.
Right.
The end of it...
Well, he was knocked to the ground.
Well, he tripped.
At one point or whatever happened.
He tripped while
and then he was
running.
Surrounded and people were saying, get him. And then there was another person who did approach him and they did have a firearm in their hand. So
and that guy was interesting because he, came up to him with his hands up, and then for, Colleen Noir said in his breakdown analysis, well, for whatever reason, he went towards the kid again, and then that's when he got shot.
Right.
The end of it is the most interesting because he walks towards police officers with his hand up. And this is where a lot of people, let's just say on the left side of the spectrum, say he gave the cops a hand signal and they just let him waltz on by. Honestly, my opinion of it is he was walking towards the cops with his hands up. The cops didn't know. They just rolled up.
Right.
They didn't know that he just shot a bunch of people, even though people were yelling, he just shot him, he just shot him. Who was he? It was so chaotic.
Right.
And he went up to the window of an officer's car, and it looked like he had his hands up, and then the officer looks like he shoot him away or told him to leave the fucking area, and he's like, okay, I did.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta think about it. These officers are walking into. I mean, they got called not because this 17-year-old kid who looks X, Y, and Z way just shot somebody. No, they're rolling up on a multiple male shot.
Right.
Their primary concern, and I could tell you this from experience, is not necessarily looking for the person with the gun at that time. It's rendering first aid. I mean, a police officer's job at the end of the day is to preserve life.
Right.
When you show up on a scene and there is somebody bleeding, somebody who may die, your first priority is to save that person's life to the best of your ability until EMS arrives and whatnot. Luckily, in some states, we could have EMS that arrive much quicker than other states because we're, in a city situation and there's a lot more of them. Right. I could see where those officers are rolling up, hearing, okay, multiple people shot. Let me get over there. Let me render first aid. Let me try and save these people's lives. Right. Not saying that the officers, I didn't hear the radio run.
Right.
Exactly. So we don't know exactly what they were told.
Exactly.
But I could tell you from a law enforcement point of view, if it comes over, hey, 18-year-old kid wearing a hat or whatever, his exact description, carrying an AR-15, just shot 3 people, someone's going to stop him. All right.
Yeah, and everyone after that is saying, oh, he fled home. And I'm like, again, home was a half hour away. That's that's not different than your commute to work.
Right, well, I saw he fled the state. Well, he went home, right?
Right, exactly.
so he's coming from out of state.
He called and then turned himself in, or I don't know exactly what happened after that, but...
Yeah, I mean... People were saying that the police let him walk away because he was a white kid.
And you know what? I really take offense to that. Not just for any like racial reason, but like I said, the scene was so chaotic, and like
and there's
you
more
said,
than one person there with a gun.
There's more than one person.
So who's
there with
to
a
say
gun.
that? Look, legally, you can't just go stopping people,
Right?
Especially because there are laws in that state where you can open carry firearms perfectly legally. So unfortunately, some people might not like to hear this, but stopping somebody solely just because they're carrying a long gun that's not a legal stop.
A relative of mine was saying that, well, if he was black, he would have been shot on the spot by police.
How?
And I said, I don't think so. You know, there was people that day open carrying, people of color, you know, all different kinds of people that were open carrying. And in states, in other protests, people open carry all the time.
Yeah,
I happen to think that it was more just, like you said, chaos and rendering first aid to those people.
Correct.
To where it looked like, it said to me, it looked like they just shoot them away. They're like, get the fuck out of here.
Right.
Not because, hey, I know you shot them, you're white, we're going to give you a pass. No.
That's the most ridiculous thing. I mean, it's mind-blowing that people could even think that.
Right. Well, they're trying to come up with things that fit their own agenda and their narrative.
Yeah, I mean, that's with everything.
It really is.
I mean,
and,
sad.
You know, had he just said, maybe he's like, hey, I just shot those people. Like, you don't know if he said that.
I think from Rittenhouse's point of view, he might have thought that those police officers were there to arrest him in that moment, and that's why he tossed his hands up. Shit, you know, they're here for me. My hands are up. You know, I'm not touching my firearm. You know, all this shit. And when they're like, "Yo, go," he was like, "Fuck, all right." I mean,
they're clearing the scene because they see a guy with a firearm. They don't want him there.
Right.
Because they don't know who he is.
Right, exactly.
And people yelling, that's him.
Yeah.
Who is that? Like, they're an armored personnel carriers,
and
basically.
You got to remember, a lot of you don't have this experience, but when you show up on a scene, especially one as chaotic as that, you get something called tunnel vision.
Yeah.
You're there for a purpose. You're hearing, you know, male shot. Okay, now you're there, you're on scene, you're looking for a male shot. People could be screaming right next to you. He's right there, he's right there, he's right there. You will not hear them. Like, you lose... You lose hearing in some of these really intense moments, and people who have never had that experience don't realize. And I don't expect, right? I mean, it happens. Yeah. It happens, and it's crazy because your partner at work could be screaming at you in your ear, and you just don't hear them. Right. And it takes time, man. It takes time for people to listen. Police officers don't go through traumatic shit like that on a daily basis to where they're conditioned. You know, I mean. Right. There's just not training like that, and a lot of people don't want military-like training. Like, that's military-like training, and people don't want police officers to have that military-esque training where they would be prepared for that type of situation. So that's just one point, you know.
Right. And you know, I think now as more information is going to come out, you're going to see that this kid is going to be in like a world of shit.
He is. I just have the. It looks like the affidavit that was filed on the 27th of August. Just go over like the things that he's charged with. I'm not going to go into each charge. I'm going to read the title of each charge. So it looks like he has, 5 counts. He's going to have first-degree reckless homicide, use of a dangerous weapon, first-degree reckless endangering safety, use of a dangerous weapon, first-degree intentional homicide. That's the one I don't think I don't think that's going to stick.
No,
but, attempted first-degree intentional homicide. I'm assuming that's the one where he shot the guy with the firearm.
Yeah.
And then first-degree reckless endangering safety, use of a dangerous weapon. So he's got a lot of shit going on.
Right.
You know, all because he decided to go.
Right. Now, this, I think we can transition into, let's just say, what could happen here.
Right. I mean, what is going on here right now? There is shit going on here, too.
There is. I think it's very different. Depending on where you are in the state, there are protests.
Right.
And in our area on Long Island...
Right.
It's not like...
There have not been any riots on Long Island. Okay,
right.
There are protests, but they're peaceful. I'll be the first one to say a peaceful protest is fine. Taylor and I both agree that you have the right to peacefully protest.
Yeah. No,
and we've said in other episodes where that kind of ends is where you start attacking people. You know, you could yell and scream all you want.
Right.
Don't hit people. Don't light things on fire. Come on.
My thing with it is if you have a problem with the police and the government, take it out with the police and the government.
Right.
Not the guy who owns the used car dealership.
Correct.
What did he do to you?
Right.
You know?
Right. So there were, I don't believe there really have been any yet, like some pretty serious riots in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, Soho, like I said in the last protest, you know, was pretty decimated. Lots of people throwing Molotov cocktails into vans filled with officers, and
Right.
a lot of agitators from outside the area. And that's one thing we see in a lot of these protests. You know, even the guy Kyle technically was
out of state.
even though it is close, it's
still out of state.
Yeah, technically. Yeah. But you find a lot of people coming in from the outside who really don't have anything to do with it other than pushing their own agenda.
Of course.
Chaos, destruction.
Right.
A lot of anarchists, a lot of communists, a lot of these people that really want to see the world burn. Yeah. In the name of some sort of justice. But if there was a really good quote I heard recently, if everyone gets an eye for an eye, then eventually the whole world will be blind. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So who is it really benefiting for people to act in this way? Yeah. You know, on Long Island, we did have a few months ago when George Floyd was killed, we did have a lot of a little more serious protests. It was a lot more frequent. People closing down parkways, people marching. I almost got caught in the closure of a parkway. I just made it past. I saw a lot of the police officers closing off exits. I'm like, oh, good thing I ain't passing.
Yeah,
this
a lot
now.
of state troopers going over there.
Yeah, it was state troopers, county police, park police. I mean, they had everyone out.
And for those of you who live on Long Island who might not know, I mean, there's things happening right now, or that were scheduled to, or have happened already. Massapequa, Merrick, West Islip, Patchogue, Southern State Parkway. I mean, these are places that are, I mean, they're going to be really close to home for a lot of you.
A lot of people, you know, it's some people think it's all fine and dandy when it's a big city that's getting burned down.
It feels really far away when you hear, oh, New York City has riots, and you're at home and you don't hear it, you don't see it, but I mean, it's
when
coming.
They come marching down your street.
I mean, and they have said that they want to enter into
suburbs.
Yeah, so
get people out of the houses. You know, this isn't your land, kind of thing. You know, the mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, I believe, she said protesters can't go on her block because she doesn't feel safe, but she'll allow her city to burn.
Right. Know. Yeah. Well, she's a special case.
Beetlejuice looking.
Yeah, I mean, she does have quite the look to her.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, the protests, and I'm going to call them protests, what's happening on Long Island, they're peaceful.
I believe they are.
They are peaceful.
And you know, there's also the quote counter protest. I hate when people say counter protest, like the people who, let's just say, the Back to Blue protesters, or I hate when they're called counter protesters because it's like you're not countering the other message. You're getting your own message out. Yeah. It is just another protest. Right. And that is one thing that really annoys me. And because somebody has a different point of view doesn't mean that they're counter this. They just have their own opinion. So it is just a protest. Right. And not a counter protest. Yeah. Counter protesters and protesters clash.
It's like whoever got there first is the protester, and then whoever got there second is the counter protester.
Not only that, but I feel like it's more of like a you versus them, an enemy and a protagonist kind of thing.
Their views are pretty opposite.
Well, not really. I mean, if you think about it, like, let's just say the majority of people that are protesting are for Black Lives Matter. Okay. Right? Now, I've said in the previous postings, I can get behind the message of Black Lives Matter, but I can't get behind the movement. The movement, in my opinion...
Like the organization, you're saying.
Yeah, the organization is...
The movement itself of Black Lives Matter, I can get behind that, right? I mean, Black Lives Matter. Just like you know, every person of color...
White lives
and I know
matter.
it's such
Jewish
a
lives matter.
It's such
Italian
a
lives
I feel like
matter.
it's such a taboo thing to say, like, all lives matter, dude. Like, and
they picked a really good name for the organization because if you say, I don't think Black Lives Matter, then automatically you're a racist asshole. Yeah. So that's why they named their organization that. Just like all these gun control organizations name themselves like Common Sense Gun Control for America. Well, don't you think we need common sense gun control? Well, not the ones you're pushing, lady.
Yeah, because it's not exactly common sense. Right.
No.
Right.
And so the organization of Black Lives Matter is really, in my opinion, a Marxist communist organization.
Yeah, I think it's a little destructive.
And also, one of the people who is on the board of trustees, I believe the vice president of the fundraising group that fundraises for Black Lives Matter is a convicted domestic terrorist, Susan Rosenberg. You could look her up. She was convicted for, I believe it was a big armored truck heist that killed a few cops, and she was put away. She was sentenced to like 60 years in prison, but on the last day of President Bill Clinton's day in office, he commuted her sentence and pardoned her.
Right.
So now Susan Rosenberg is on I think she's the vice president of the company that sponsors the fundraising for Black Lives Matter. And that just gets into my mind that, okay, these people are a convicted domestic terrorist.
They have a history of a certain type of ideology or way of thinking.
Right. Destabilization of the nuclear family. It's like...
Right. I mean, and there's plenty of data and, studies that say like the nuclear family is like a good thing.
It is.
Having a strong presence of both parents and, like, why would you want to disable that?
Right. You have a nuclear family at its core, and then you have a community.
Right.
And then from there, you have a strong nation. Right. But it all starts at the foundation of a family.
Right.
Whether, and I'm not saying a traditional family of a husband and wife. It could be, two mothers, two dads.
Right.
Just strong parenting, somebody to teach.
Correct.
Really good values. Somebody that you can, as a kid, you can go to and say, hey, Dad, I need this. Or, hey, Mom, can I ask you something?
Right.
Unfortunately, we see that absentee fatherism is a really big problem in families today. Single mothers, are always working to support the kids, and there's no parents home to teach structure and values.
Right, and there were laws that were passed that kind of help prevent a father from being in the home. I forget the name of the actual law. You guys could look into it. Perhaps if I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But there are laws that were actually passed, in the city that said like, okay, look, if you're a single mother, the state's going to give you money or the city's going to give you money, provide you money. That's fine. What they then said was, we're going to give you this money until a father figure enters the home. Then that money stops. So now you have a reason for single mothers, and I'm not saying like single black mothers,
right?
Or single
it's just
Hispanic
single
mothers, right? Single mothers, to not find somebody and not bring a strong second person into the home, and I think that's counterproductive.
It is. It honestly is, and just not to get too deep into like my history, but. I was a child of divorce.
Right.
My parents split when I was 3.
Mm-hmm.
I never had, the regular nuclear family, but my dad loved me. He was in the picture. He was fighting to be in the picture. My mom loved me. And I grew up with loving parents. And I think, my wife jokes, she's like, for all the crap you went through as a kid, you came out pretty normal. I'm like, I know.
You came out all right.
But like, I thought it was weird in elementary school that other kids didn't go see their dad on Thursday nights and every other weekend.
Right.
I didn't know.
Right.
I had no knowledge of this growing up until I encountered other kids saying, "Oh, your dad doesn't live with you?" No. Like,
yeah, and I mean, it's weird because when I was younger too. Now that you mention it, I also had a similar experience. I'm talking about like realizing that people were divorced versus not divorced. Like I remember, being in elementary school and middle school and having somebody be like, I think it was elementary school, I first like realized like divorce was a thing. Like someone was like, oh yeah, well, like I don't live with my dad, or I live with, me and my mom live with my mom, whatever. And it's like, wait a minute, like, I mean, I live with both my parents. Like, where the hell is your dad? Yeah. It's like, and that's kind of where you realize, right? I mean, and getting older now, I realize like, is really not a big deal.
Right. Not all things are meant to be, but as long as parents can provide love, stability, and teach their kids good morals. Like, I know, for example, it's not good to throw a Molotov cocktail into a van full of police officers. Right. That was something that my parents didn't have to teach me.
Right.
But that's something that just kind of trickled down from them.
It's crazy because when all that was happening, when all that came out because of the George Floyd protests, and subsequent riots in the city, there was a van, an NYPD van that was Molotov cocktail and it burst into flames. And I had some lifelong friends who were like on social media saying, that they deserved it. And these are, these are people who don't realize that, I'm in law enforcement, and not that I think they would care anyway.
Right.
And it's just like, at that point, like, man, I just had to like, that's somebody I just had to like remove from my life.
Right.
And for those of you out there who might be listening who are waiting to get into law enforcement, you're going to have to, there's going to be people in your life that you're going to cut out. And you might not realize it now who these people are who are super against law enforcement, but there are people out there and it will come out when something happens. I mean, I'm telling you, lifelong friends. I was a Boy Scout. These are people who are Boy Scouts with me, right? Boy Scouts are supposed to have this, we're supposed to be quote unquote, better, not better, but like more well prepared, more, And these are those types of people who are saying like, oh, like police officers in New York City deserved. They didn't even do anything. Right. They weren't the ones who had anything to do with George Floyd. No, but they deserve to burn to death.
It's an
like
us
it's amazing,
versus them
man.
mentality now that's being pushed, and it's being, you know, I don't want to say it's being normalized, but due to certain politicians who I think aren't denouncing it strongly enough,
right?
It's being okayed in some sense.
Right.
You know, I mean, you know, Portland is refusing federal help, and their city is in shambles.
I think every single night there is a riot there, and it has not stopped.
Somebody was just killed recently. We were looking up video of it, and like I believe it was an execution. I mean, yeah,
there was some stuff said that like, oh, he's a Trump supporter, get him, and he was killed.
Right, just shot just in the street.
Right.
You know, and this isn't the Middle East. This isn't, you know, China in the 60s. This is Portland in 2020.
I think like mentioning this, it kind of rolls into a good point to kind of talk about like what, you know, how to keep yourself safe.
Right.
You know, because this might, you know, if you're listening and you're from New York City, or you're listening this from, you know, if you're in New York City, you already have to deal with this.
Yeah.
Depending on where
you are in the epicenter of all this in the state. And people that live upstate, or people that even live in the suburbs, I mean, you know, we're like you said earlier, we're kind of removed from this, but there's always the potential. Right. There's always a potential for anything to happen.
Right, exactly.
And this is why I think now our thoughts on this is going to be our opinions and our thoughts on this. Like I said earlier, I think the number one way to keep yourself safe is to not get into it.
Don't go.
Like,
and I know a lot of people aren't gonna. That's not gonna sit well with some people, because they're gonna say, "Well, why should I have to stay home?
You don't have to.
When my city is burning to the ground." Yeah, I mean, you could do whatever you want. This is a free country,
exactly,
and you have free will.
But in order to keep yourself safe, that's the number one thing you could do is to keep yourself out of harm's way.
Right. You probably shouldn't be there. I mean, you wouldn't walk into a burning building, right, just for fun. So why are you gonna walk into a riot?
And I think just to make a point. Think of this as fun. Like I think,
I'm sure they do.
On both sides. Not people who are there, let's just say, to quote counter protest, but like the videos I saw from Wisconsin of them smashing up the cars, you know, with baseball bats. Right. I mean, in any other scenario, if like it might be kind of fun to smash a window with a baseball bat.
Oh yeah.
But not in a riot sense. I mean, I've been to a machine gun shoot where I've helped blow up a car, and that was fucking awesome.
Right. Yeah,
but
that's pretty cool.
But that same car at a used car dealership in Wisconsin, I wouldn't want to touch.
Right.
You know? And I think that is the number one thing I could tell people. Listen, if you don't have to be there, if you don't have skin in the game, if it's not your business, you know, like place of business, if you don't have a loved one that you're going to protect, stay out of it.
And that's really what it comes down to. Like if you're going to be like Kyle and you're going to say, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to protect this business, but I could tell you lethal force, you know, really isn't justified to protect property.
It depends on the place and the circumstance, and if it's yours, then you have a lot more of an argument. Like, for example, arson, I think is a defendable thing if somebody's going to burn down your house. Or
I
your
could
business.
see that, but
Arson
then at the same time, like, you know, you're not. Yeah. Okay. So arson, right? Because fire can kill people.
Right.
If someone is trying to steal your car, that's not really a justified use. I mean, you might.
Way. If you're in that car and they're trying to get to you, like a car jacking,
that's different, right? Because you're in danger.
Right.
If you're sleeping and you hear glass break and you look out your window and someone's getting into your car, you're not. Oh, you really can't be shooting out your window to stop that person. It's just not going to be. It's just not going to be.
As shown in
especially in New York.
Yes, New York,
you're not going to be allowed to do that. All right, so New York, you can't.
Getting into New York, now, the bubble that is New York, where most common sense laws don't apply, and everybody is a criminal until proven otherwise.
Correct, pretty much.
So we said, you know, stay the fucking home, stay out of it, right?
Yeah.
Now let's just say, for example, you're in the city and you're walking home from work, and you get caught up in this, You can't stay at home because you're now caught up in the middle of it, right? What, in your professional opinion, John? What do you think a person might be able to do that can help keep themselves safe in, let's just say, a more urban environment, or if they get caught up in it, or they round a corner and people are shooting at each other, or, you know.
I mean, it's so hard. Like if you're just walking down the street and you just happen upon a riot. I mean, that sounds ridiculous to say, but let's say you I mean, it could.
You
I
get
mean,
caught
look,
up in a protest.
yeah, it could happen. Something rolls in,
or
and
you
right.
know,
yeah, I would say. I mean, if you're in New York City, you don't even really have the means to protect yourself.
No.
And then, like we said in some other episodes, like certain types of pocket knives are not legal.
Right.
And the laws changed recently with some of that stuff, but still, if it's over a certain amount of inches, if it's over a certain length, then you're
concealable.
You're gonna have trouble if it's over a certain length.
Right.
I mean, other than just getting home right away, I mean,
I
geez,
think
in New York City,
or the boroughs,
you might be in
New
trouble.
York. Right.
Well, yeah. I consider the boroughs,
Brooklyn,
the boroughs.
Queens.
That's all New York City.
Yeah.
When we say New York City, we're talking about the 5 boroughs.
I don't think there's much going on in Staten Island.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, there's not much going on in a lot of places. Like, there's not much going on in like the Bronx. Right. A little bit in Fordham, but in other parts of the Bronx, there's really nothing going on.
Right. So I think somebody who might happen to be walking to and from work, let's just say in a more urban area in the boroughs, and they happen upon something.
Right. They're like, what happens if you're walking past, coming home from work and and the way you go to work is, by the Blue Lives Matter painting, or I'm sorry, the Black Lives Matter painting that de Blasio painted in front of Trump Tower, right? I would almost recommend, like, you kind of know that's a hot spot. You might just want to go around the block, go a different way.
Right. And we're not telling people not to protest. And this is the one thing that people often, might criticize my opinion for. Is like, no, we're not telling people not to protest, but these things kind of turn south most often. I mean, the phrase "mostly peaceful" that's a BS phrase in my opinion.
Yeah, when there was like a CNN article or the video where it was like fiery but mostly peaceful protest. Like, what the fuck? What the fuck? You kidding me? And and the guy standing there and behind him, it's like the whole city's fucking on fire.
I don't know if that was real or if that was like a thing from the Babylon Bee or the
but I don't know. I just saw it passing by. I mean, I think the article headline is legit.
Right.
But I could be wrong. But that's pretty funny if it's real.
Right.
But I mean, it sucks because people are gonna say, well, we live in a free country. I shouldn't have to walk around the block. And you're right. You're 100% right. You shouldn't have to. But I'm saying, like, if you want to avoid the problem altogether, right? There's certain places that you just shouldn't walk through. Right. I mean, and it sucks.
Would you walk through a sketchy neighborhood at night?
Well, depending on who you are, but I mean, like, man,
depending on if the drugs are good or not.
Oh God, no, but like, it's just, it's hard. It's hard to say. It's hard to tell somebody don't go that way, but I mean, it's unfortunate.
Right. Use some common sense. Use that street smarts that people should have.
Yeah.
And just say, you know what? I'm not going to get caught up in that. Now.
And another thing, and I know this is gonna strike a chord with a lot of people, man, but people are targeting Trump supporters.
Yes.
So, and I'm not saying if you put a MAGA hat on, you're looking for trouble, but I'm saying don't be surprised if you're targeted.
Right.
I see a lot of people, and I see a lot of people on Long Island, they wear MAGA hats. They don't give a shit. Yeah. They wear, the face masks, and they say, MAGA or Trump 2020, Trump Pence, whatever, or they drive around in their Ford F-150s and they got the fucking flag on the back, and it is what it is, but in certain areas, that there's more Trump supporters than others. Long Island, I think Suffolk County is a red county.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get as much flack. Right. If you do that in New York City, there's going to probably be a problem.
Right.
Especially if you're in like a hot zone. So I would say, like, if you want to mitigate your chances of issue.
In a perfect world, you shouldn't have to, though. And this is what we're getting at.
I know.
People just can't leave politics alone. They can't just let people be who they want to be from either side. And to me, like, I used to have like stickers on my car and a bunch of things, but honestly, I took them off. I don't want, because what wound up happening, not to get too deep into it, but my wife took my car to work one day, and she works with kids in a kind of a yuppie area, and a parent got really pissed because on the back of my car out front of the business, there's the sticker that said "fuck gun control." Oh, and the Karen, I'm going to call her a Karen.
I didn't know this happened too.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, this happened a while ago. My wife took my car to work. She works with kids in a sports coach kind of environment, and in a pretty yuppie area up on the North Shore of Long Island. And Karen came in and said, "I hope whoever car that is out there is not working here. I would hate to see somebody who has that mindset working with my kids. And the manager like knew that my wife took it wasn't her car, so he's like, oh, it's probably somebody across the street who just parked in our lot. I don't know whose car that is.
Right.
And my wife was really upset. And my wife is not anti-gun. She's just more of like, hey, let people do whatever they want. It doesn't bother her, but you know, the fact is now, you know, my wife, I can't have her getting into this. And especially in today's political climate, like I can handle it. Like if somebody tells it to me, I'd tell them like, you know, go screw themselves. But I'm not gonna
say, go fuck themselves.
Right. I'm not gonna put my wife in that situation.
Exactly.
I believe that honestly, a lot of times I'm very low key with things. Like I said in a beginning episode, like the way, for example, I keep my ARs is keep it simple, stupid.
Right.
I believe in low key. You know, the one that the nail that sticks out the most is the first to get hammered.
Right.
You know, and people could express themselves however they want. You could put anything you want on your car, but like John said, it works both ways.
Right.
You know, don't expect somebody to not give you a hard time.
Right. And I've been saying this for a while now, and I think it's pretty true. It's crazy, like that far left, like the real radicals, they're fighting quote unquote intolerance by being intolerant.
Anti-fascist. Antifa is the biggest piece of crap, ironic group.
I mean, it's crazy, man. I mean, could you imagine, like, you have the left who is like, oh, the right is so intolerant. They're all fucking racist and sexist. And then you have on the other side, you have the left saying this stuff about the right. And then you have the left attacking the right by throwing shit at them, cornering them places and screaming at them, saying fuck you at the Republican National Convention. That's fucking intolerant. That's intolerance.
If anybody wants to look back into a little history, these modern day leftist Antifa type people remind me of the Chinese Red Guard. That was a group during the Communist Revolution in China during the Mao Zedong. You know, the Chinese Cultural Revolution. The youth was indoctrinated by the communist factions in different areas, and they got these like little militia groups together. And they wore red armbands, and they carried their Mao Zedong books, and they disowned the bourgeois. If teachers didn't teach the teachings of Mao Zedong, they brought them out, humiliated them, shaved their heads, beat them.
Jesus.
They basically did away with the old traditional Chinese culture, with, you know, destroying statues, you know, burning books, and if it wasn't the teachings of Mao Zedong, it wasn't now to be accepted. So the Red Guard, the Chinese Cultural Revolution, took over, and now you have what is modern day China because of it, where they were running over people with tanks in Tiananmen Square. And to say that people like this isn't the same thing, it technically is not, but it is very, very similar. And the only reason I really kind of got into that, by the way, just a little segue, is from learning about Chinese firearms. Like, I had no idea about all this crap. I always knew like Mao Zedong was some kind of dictator and demagogue, but I never knew the history of how he came to power and how creepily similar it is to what's going on in America today. The us versus them mentality, basically calling the rich the problem of the country, the elites the problem of the country. You know, the young people take to the streets, wear red armbands, put on, you know, take up arms and cause destruction, tear down statues. It happened.
And it's weird. It's like there are some scary similarities here.
There is.
You know.
There is. And persecution happens in many ways. So political persecution, religious persecution, this is a form, in my opinion, of persecution. If you don't think the way that I do, then you are a problem and you need to be dealt with.
You know, it's interesting. I'm friends with a couple people who are still in they're taking college courses, whatever, they're finishing up their degrees, and they were sending me they're taking like classes, and there's like discussions, and there's a lot, like almost every single class that this person's in that has discussions. I mean, every single first discussion is based on Black Lives Matter and the killing of black people by police officers. College professors are pushing that narrative.
Well, these college professors of today are all the radicals that were leftovers from the 60s. They were all students of the 60s that now became professors and teachers and are teaching the ideologies that they learned back then. Now, not to get too ranty about it, but now we're dealing with issues that are coming to light, like I said, like people who might have stuff on their cars in the suburbs, or people that might be traveling back and forth to work. You know, what can somebody do? So like we kind of broach the topic of like the city, you know, what you could do if you happen upon a riot. You know, get the fuck out of there.
Jesus.
But now the suburbs are different because now it's coming to you. You're not going to it, it's coming to you.
Correct.
So I think that honestly, if you're home
Mm-hmm.
and you see this stuff going on in your neighborhood, like my wife told me one day, this was a few months ago, she said, oh, there was a demonstration we have like a park like a couple of blocks away.
Right.
And she's like, oh, there was a demonstration at the park. I'm like, why didn't you tell me? She's like, oh, it was just a bunch of people yelling and signs and walking. I'm like, if anything like that happens, just tell me. Like, just let me know.
Yeah, I mean, recently, I think it was like in one of the villages here near where my fiance works. There was like a protest where they were like walking down the street, holding signs, or she was like driving back and forth. I think it was like on Higbee Lane in
that one.
Yeah. So she was like driving, and there was like people like laying in the middle of the street, and she told me, she was like, hey, she wasn't driving at the time, she saw it on like social media, and she's like, wow, look what they're doing. I'm like, listen, just don't go down that block today, okay? Like, if that's the way you go, I told her, like, look, if that's the way you go, please don't go, because that is the type of situation that could really, I mean, they're laying in the middle of the street, you could still get through traffic, but who's to say they don't get up at one point and now they block traffic, and now you're stuck in a situation where there's no clear exit. And we're gonna kind of, I mean, we touched on it earlier, we were just having a little talk before the podcast, like
pregame.
Yeah, like, let's say like you do get surrounded, like let's say, Taylor, like let's say you got stuck on the Southern State
Parkway.
Yeah, and now people are surrounding your car. Like, what do you do?
It's very situationally dependent. I've thought about this, and a lot
me too.
of people
I've thought about
have.
it too.
And people will say, "I'll just drive right through them." No,
well.
Okay. Like, in my opinion, for me personally, if they're just a bunch of people, let's just say I'm a little bit back in traffic. If they're just a bunch of people, I'm stuck. What am I going to do?
Right.
I'll just call my job and be like, "Hey, I'm stuck."
Yeah, I mean, it's inconvenient. It's an inconvenience, but I mean, that's the point, right?
If shit starts going south, then I'm looking for an exit. All right, let's just say I'm in the middle lane and I can't get out. Like, I'm honking my horn. I'm going to drive the wrong way on the shoulder just to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, if you can. I mean, you are probably going to be completely boxed in.
Right, probably. But now, if I'm towards the front and let's just say they're starting to beat on my car, and if I don't say Black Lives Matter, if I don't raise my fist in solidarity, now I'm a target.
And this actually happened recently, right, in that restaurant where...
there were these two people were sitting outside, and this lady was surrounded by a mob, and they were telling her to, like, raise her fist, and she's like, no, why should I have to bend to the mob?
Right.
Like, I support you guys and your efforts, but I'm not telling you're not telling me to do this.
Right.
Like, at that point, if it starts turning violent...
Right, and we're not saying like drive through with the intention of like killing as many people as possible, but look,
my situation's different because like, let's just say I have my wife in the car. My wife's pregnant.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And these people beating on my car, and all it takes is somebody to throw a brick through a window, and if it's hit, there's other more important things than some guys.
Yeah, here's the thing, right? Like, if I'm in the car alone, I'm a law enforcement officer. I do carry a firearm. There is a greater tolerance level for me because I know at some point, like, you might be banging on my car, whatever. That's one thing. That's property damage. I can get that fixed. That's not a big deal for me personally. Like, and I know, like, if something goes a little bit beyond that, I do have a firearm. In the worst case scenario, I can defend myself. But now, if you're talking about me in the car with my fiance or other people, the tolerance level for me is going to be a lot lower.
Right.
Especially if I'm the one driving, I'm gonna take that chance, even if I end up getting arrested for that.
Right.
At least I know that my fiance is safe.
Right.
I'd rather get her and I out of there, and maybe me have to go to jail.
Right.
But I know that she's safe.
There's videos of even people saying like, "Hey, I tried to help this other person, but I still got dragged out of a car and kicked in the head."
Well, there was that guy recently who just got dragged out of his car and beaten by, whatever mob it was during a riot, and I think he died.
Was you talking about the guy that got kicked in the head?
It was like an older gentleman.
Oh.
He was like in critical condition. He like got dragged out of his car, beaten to the point of his like losing his life, and I think at the hospital died, and he was like in a coma. I don't know. I have to update my. You might not know.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different things.
The problem is there's so many of them, and it really is just like, why? Like, this shouldn't be.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where it happened, but it did happen. This guy was dragged out of his car. He was beaten. Right. It's sad, man.
And
it's
you
scary.
mentioned, you having a firearm. A lot of people aren't going to have that capability to have a firearm.
Right, so your tolerance level for, and when I say tolerance, you know what I mean by tolerance. I mean, like, your level of like what you can bear to deal with. Right. So like at some point, like we were saying, for me, I could deal with a little more because I do know I have a little bit more of an edge.
Right.
Know
that those protesters or rioters, whatever, probably aren't going to have a firearm. Most likely.
Right. Most likely.
Right. So you have that upper hand in
Right.
a worst case scenario.
Right.
Me, on the other hand,
Correct.
if it's just me and my car,
Right.
I got 4 wheels and a gas pedal.
Correct.
That's my
Right.
end
Right.
all be all. That
Right.
is the last resort. Now, when I was talking earlier about it coming to the suburbs, I think a lot of important lessons. One thing I noticed that we could learn is from this kid Kyle Rittenhouse is that he had an AR-15.
Right.
Right. An AR-15 is a really effective tool against people that are trying to do you harm.
Correct.
In New York, we could have AR-15s.
Correct.
But they're limited in some capacity if they're a fixed mag
Right.
or they're, let's just say, neutered. In previous episodes, I said my opinion is that the most important thing you could have on an AR-15 or any semi-automatic that was designed that way is the detachable magazine.
Yeah, for sure.
When Kyle Rittenhouse was on the ground firing at people with his back on the ground, if that gun were to jam, let's just say, for him to try and fiddle to clear a jam, to reload from the ejection port, it is not going to happen.
It's not safe.
I think that a fixed mag gun is more just a range toy.
Yeah.
And I think that the ability to reload and get back into whatever fight you happen to find yourself in is more important than looking cool, having a pistol grip, having a compensator. Because he was
100%.
defending himself with like a $400 AR.
Yeah,
and
a
like
budget gun. Yeah.
budget gun.
Right.
It's still a firearm, and it still can be used effectively if you know how to use it, and if it has the capability to be put back into the fight if something were to happen to it.
Right.
This, to me, is a real-world scenario that happened. It was filmed. It was well-documented. And I think can really teach a lot of people here in New York, like, hey, just because you want a gun that looks cool, it's not going to function the same.
Right. And this situation with Kyle could easily be any of us. It really can
Easily.
be. Even if it's through no fault of our own.
Right.
I mean,
Home
going
defense.
back to something we spoke about a few episodes ago, it might even have been in our very first episode about, Sandy, Hurricane
yes,
Sandy.
yes.
I mean, Taylor, you were there.
So speaking of being young, I'll tell you a
Right.
quick little story.
Right.
I was working at a convenience store at the time, and Hurricane Sandy happened. We lost power, and my boss at the time was like, "Hey Taylor, like again, this was literally my scenario.
I mean, this is a really similar
this is a very
scenario
similar He's
to
like,
Kyle.
"Hey Taylor, can you come by with some of your guns and hang out, keep the riffraff away?" I'm like, "Okay, yeah." And I was like, dumb me. I was like, "Yeah, gung ho." I was making shit money. My boss was really just trying to get me there just to make sure his shit wasn't. I had no skin in the game. I was just a cashier at a convenience store. But, I brought a couple of guns, and a lot of people were hanging out at the store.
Right.
We had my boss's dog, Lenny the Pit Bull, who was really cool and kind of had a human personality.
Right.
But, this could have easily been me. And I'll tell you a quick anecdote. I had my AK, and this was pre-Safe Act, so it just had a pistol grip. Right? It didn't have a threaded barrel. It didn't have a bayonet lug. At the time, it was compliant.
Right.
So I had it slung over my shoulder, and I noticed we were sitting in the store. The store was dark. We had some candles lit, whatever.
Right.
And apparently the National Guard and Suffolk PD, I guess, chose our spot as like a little meetup point or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's right on like a main road.
Yeah, it's kind of by a main road, kind of by a parkway.
Right.
And, I see this Humvee pull up, and I see a couple of cop cars. So I just I just walk out. I have the thing over my shoulder.
I love the story, yeah.
I have the thing over my shoulder,
Right.
and I'm like, "Hey guys, if you need anything, we have water. We don't have hot coffee, but anything you guys need, just come in and grab."
Yeah.
And they saw the gun over my shoulder and they're like, "Hey man, put the gun down, like hands up." I'm like, "Oh shit!" Like
Yeah.
I kind of forgot I had it on me.
Right.
I was just more like, "Oh, let me tell these guys we're here for them."
Right.
Right. So cop came over. I had my hand up. He took it was over my right shoulder. He took my AK, and it had a 30-round mag because it was
Right.
pre-ban at the time. It was legal.
Right.
So he put it down on the ground in the parking lot, and I'm like, "Hey man," he's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "Oh, I work here. We're open. We're just
Right.
staying open," because it was like this first or second night that we didn't have power.
Right.
And I told him like, "Oh, we're just staying open to help people in the neighborhood, give them water, supplies, like
Right.
if they, if they need something, like
Right.
we're just staying open." He's like, "Oh, okay, well, do me a favor, go and put that inside." I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna go pick it up." He's like, "Yeah, go put it inside."
Right.
So they wound up coming in and grabbing some bottles of water and whatever else, but it was a real eye opener. Like I had a gun pointed at me,
Yeah.
and saying, "Put that on the hand,
Right.
don't touch it, whatever."
Right.
Now, obviously, I wasn't doing anything wrong.
Correct,
The
right.
manager at the time came out and said, "No, he works here. Come
of course,
on in, whatever."
right.
But to that cop, I was a guy with a rifle with an AK during a blackout in a natural disaster.
Right.
I mean, it could really easily turn south.
Of course.
And this was me being a young guy.
Right.
You know, I think at the beginning of college, I was like, I don't know, like 20, 21 at the time. And
I knew you at the time.
Yes, you did. And this was a crazy time. This was the beginning of Hurricane Sandy, like the first or second night. And
yeah, and by the way, this just reminded me this motherfucker. I don't know if you know what I'm going to say right now. This you're gonna, as soon as I say it, you're gonna remember. I was living at my parents' house at the time, and they received a lot of water.
Oh yeah.
And you should see his face right now. He's like, shit. So every time I would see Taylor after that, he would say, "Hey, what's up, John?" And he would be like, "Yeah, this kid doesn't have a house."
I was young and dumb, and you know what? I wound up having a lot of because, like I said earlier, split parents, divorce. My father's house, he lived in Long Beach in the South Shore, and his house got fucked.
Right.
The house I'm living in currently in Baldwin, which was my grandparents' house, also got fucked. When I was living in Suffolk County at my mother's place, we just didn't have power. That was it.
Right.
And I didn't know the extent of it the first or second night because I was trying to get a hold of my dad. I haven't heard from him. They closed the parkways. I wound up like just going there, and I got stopped by the police, and they're like, "You can't go." And I'm like trying to get into Long Beach. I'm like, "No, my father's there. I haven't spoken to him in days. You know, I don't know." They're like, "All right, go." And it was a really crazy time.
Yeah.
And you know what? I always had a firearm on me. I had my AK, which, you know, like I said, maybe not the best choice, but it's what I had.
Yeah.
And you know,
I mean, I don't even know. How can you even say that?
Well,
wasn't the best choice just because of the way the gun looks?
Yeah, optics.
Yeah, but I mean, come on. We're not everybody is going to have the most perfectly politically correct firearm.
No, I know. And this was, like I said, pre-Safe Act,
right.
And everything I had was legal. You know, the pre-band mags, the pistol grip was legal.
Right. I mean, and it was never a question though when you were working at that place and you got stopped by the police, and they effectively disarmed you, in that moment just to make sure everything was safe and whatnot. You know, this is not like a disarming like, oh, you can't have guns. It was a disarming like, okay,
he didn't take it away from me. He just told me to go put it inside.
Right. Yeah. I mean, police officers in a situation like that do have a duty to make sure that everything is safe. Right. And
I kind of surprised them. Like they didn't know anyone was in the store, and I came out. I'm like, "Hey, you guys need
with
anything?"
a gun, right?
It wasn't pointing it at him. It was slung over my shoulder, barrel pointed up.
And I'm going to say, like, if you're in a similar situation and a police officer looks at you and says, "Don't touch the gun, put your hands up, remove the gun," like,
put
look,
your hands up.
just listen, my God, because, I mean, it's very, very... You could swing a gun around and shoot somebody very quick.
And, you know, people say, well, you were irresponsible for going out and approaching law enforcement with a rifle. And I'm like, you know what? It was over my shoulder. Yeah. I kind of didn't realize it was there. I kind of forgot about it. I've been carrying it for a couple of days.
But I'm pretty sure on Long Island it's legal to open carry.
That's one thing I learned recently in New York State. You can open carry firearms, long guns and shotguns. Not handguns, but I didn't know this.
Right.
And... you know, I even asked a couple of cop friends of mine. They're like, "Yeah, but you know,
you're gonna be subject to some other stuff. I can almost guarantee you, even if you're on Long Island, if you're open carrying a long gun, you're gonna get arrested. Well, I don't think you're gonna get arrested, but people are gonna call. Right. They're gonna call 911, and they're gonna say there's a person here
standing on Sunrise Highway with a gun.
Right, and I don't think that you're necessarily gonna get arrested. You're gonna get approached. I mean, did you talk to a Suffolk County cop and they said you would get arrested for that?
No, but he's like depending, like, because I asked him because it was about like I was talking to him in terms of like a protest or something, and he's like, you know what? If there's enough of them, honestly, like it's not illegal,
right?
But given the context of how you're doing it, you're going to get a lot of unwanted attention.
Oh, yeah, you're going to get unwanted attention. You know, well, that's what I mean, yeah.
It also depends on a lot of town ordinances.
It could, yeah.
Ordinances might have something to do with it, but he said, like, state-wise, you're fine.
Yeah.
I mean, upstate is a little different than downstate. Again,
right.
And the city is a no-go for that.
Yeah, I mean, the cops are going to come. They're going to make sure that you're not... your intention is to not do something illegal. Right. And I mean, it's hard because... you can do it. Yeah. You could get arrested for something like disorderly conduct. You know, I mean, it's borderline. You probably won't.
They'll probably try and throw some BS at you, and they'll.
Yeah, and you know what? Honestly, I think on Long Island you wouldn't experience that. I think on Long Island they would come. They would make sure. First of all, probably make sure your firearm was legal.
Yeah. Yeah,
you
that's a
know,
big thing.
and I'm not talking like New York Safe Act legal. I'm talking like it's not a stolen firearm.
And you know, honestly, like even with let's just say a fixed mag AR, it looks like what the state defines as an assault weapon.
Right.
You
So they
won't
would have the reasonable suspicion to stop you and
they
and
would
all that
know
stuff.
it's not a quote assault
Right.
weapon until they look at it and see that it's fixed magged or
Yeah,
whatever.
but I'm not even sure like a Suffolk County cop would even bother with that, man, to be honest.
Depends. I think that if you're like, you know, if there's a protest where there's like 15 people, I don't think they're gonna. They can't do anything to a group of 15 people. They might just say like, hey, what you're doing is legal, but like keep it on the sidewalk.
Right.
You know, don't do this, and we won't have an issue. I think that if one guy is just walking down the road with a gun, that's going to bring a lot more unwanted attention.
It's a lot more suspicious.
Downstate. Upstate is completely different. There's a lot of hunters that walk on the roads upstate with a firearm. And, you know, but I'm just talking suburban, downstate New York.
And there's a lot of people here who are very frightened.
Oh, yeah.
Very frightened of just the idea of maybe I'm going to get shot somewhere. I mean, look, I'm not going to lie. I feel the same way. And I don't feel the same way about, like, law-abiding citizens. But, look, when I go to the mall with my fiance, I think about it like, damn, like, this is a bad scenario. Malls are fucking terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people in the somewhat enclosed space, and they're kind of all in like one straight line,
right? And
you know, in a hall.
If something were to happen, it turns into a herd mentality where stampede and
And you know, it's funny because I'm always looking to where exits are. My fiance doesn't get into that type of stuff, but you know, I've recently said to her like, oh yeah, well there's an exit here, and like in the back of every store there's an exit, and she's like, there is?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, you don't look at shit like that? Like, goddamn. She's like, I've never looked for the quickest exit to anything ever. I'm like, dude, you need to start.
You know, I first started doing that in what was that, 2012 when that the shooting happened in the movie theater. And I'm like,
that's fucking terrible.
You know, if you're all the way up in the back of the theater and somebody's down there shooting at you, you're
in trouble.
What are you gonna do? Jump over the thing and full, basically a story down to that, you know, it kind of gets into that mentality of keeping yourself out of harm's way,
especially for somebody who doesn't have the
ability to shoot back.
Well, no, I mean just the ability to carry. I mean, look, if you were able to carry a handgun into a movie theater, wouldn't you?
I would. Upstate New York, people can carry and have concealed carry, and this conversation might be kind of like old news to them, but I mean...
Well, I mean, law enforcement can carry.
Yeah.
They have not open carry, they have full carry.
Right.
The only place, if I'm not mistaken, and
federal building or something.
Yeah, and if you're someone who knows a little more, don't crucify me on this one. From what I understand, law enforcement can carry pretty much everywhere they want, except for federal owned lands or like federal, like like you couldn't go to the White House.
Yeah.
You know, even if you're a law enforcement officer and carry a gun, you're going to be arrested. So, you know, that's kind of, but you know, like then again, post offices are federal land, and like you know, cops carry there.
Yeah, I think that's just more of like a local thing.
Yeah, honestly. I mean, I don't think you're not, well, that's the whole thing. Like you can't go to the White House or, you know, the Capitol or whatever and carry concealed firearm there or open carry unless you are authorized by law. As far as like, if you're an on-duty officer, you can. If you're an off-duty officer carrying concealed, you can't.
Even if you're a federal officer, I don't know what the laws are.
No,
for
I think
federal officers.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So
no, there's people we could ask about that.
There are. So I think one big takeaway from this, John, is that the number one thing you could do is just to keep yourself out of harm's way.
Right.
Whatever you can do.
Yeah.
I think that if you were to use a firearm, that you want the most effective tool for what your particular scenario is. I mean, I think a lot of people, the handgun is the best tool for that.
I think so. I think that for those of you who do have a full carry, you should be full carrying every single day. Every day, everywhere you go.
Right.
Under the law.
Yeah, I mean, if a restaurant says, hey, you can't bring a handgun in here, if they don't know about it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, the law is one thing and store policy is another, right? So, you know, I'm a law enforcement officer. I'm legally allowed to carry into stores, even if they have, you know, a no firearm policy. Yeah. So if it's concealed, you know, it's not going to be an issue because they're not going to see it. Let's say they do see it. Like if you go to a restaurant and they have like it's a gun-free zone.
Ooh,
you know, we don't allow. Place ever. You know what a good example of this is? Like the Giant Stadium.
Oh
you know?
Yeah.
So Giant Stadium, they don't allow law enforcement on or off duty, and even Jones Beach Amphitheater, they don't allow police officers off duty to concealed carry firearms, and it's kind of, to be completely honest, has steered me away.
Right.
Because that's kind of scary, and you do have to go through metal detectors there, so it's not even like a situation where you can like get it in. So legally, let's say you did get it in and you did carry it there as a law enforcement officer, you wouldn't be prosecuted in any way. But if they did find out, they could ask you to leave.
Yeah. Also,
and you would have to leave.
The Barclays Center in Brooklyn allows law enforcement to carry.
Well, do they really?
Yeah, off duty, I believe, as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah, I believe so. Last I heard.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you're the type of person who can legally carry, before you go somewhere, just go on. You give them a call and say, "Look, I'm a law enforcement officer. Is it going to be an issue?" Especially because if you do take your gun there, and then all of a sudden they're like, "No, you can't come in with it. What the hell are you going to do?"
Right. The only thing you can do is turn around and leave.
If you're from Long Island, I mean, if you're a city cop, for example, you might even be able to do this if you're a cop in another area. But I know if you're a city cop and you go and you live like on Long Island and you travel into the city, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh shit, like I can't bring my gun into like this, this theater on Broadway, to see a show. You could actually go to a local precinct, and you can like kind of voucher it there. You can like leave it behind the desk with the desk officer, and they'll like make a command log entry and just make sure that it's safe, and then you can come back and get it. Very interesting, the 9/11 museum, you're not allowed to carry as an off-duty police officer. You cannot carry in the 9/11 museum.
Wow.
Yep. And there are some very serious.
Is that a city museum, or is that a federal museum? Is that a?
It's just the museum's policy. It's,
wow.
I'm sure it's a city-run organization. Yeah, but yeah, you're not allowed. And the metal detectors that are there are huge. They're heavy duty. It's not like the rectangle ones that you walk through. I think the last time I was there, they were like these huge like circular metal detectors with belts, and I was like, holy shit. I mean, but you can't carry there. Not allowed to carry there, which always struck me as strange. I'm sure there's a reason behind it, but it just struck me as strange. Like if I want to come into the city with family and I want to go, I can't. You'd have to leave your gun with the precinct and then go in. That's strange.
Right. Yeah, that to me is very odd. That's the first I'm hearing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that if you're able to have a handgun, that is honestly one of the best options.
Easily concealable. People don't have to know you have it, but you know you have it.
Right. And if you're, let's just say, at home and something comes to you, obviously a rifle or a shotgun. I mean, those are the only two left. But
yeah, we're not talking about people breaking into your house necessarily, but like let's say like a riot marches down your street,
a riot, but like
protests,
an unruly group of people,
a disorderly group
from any side of the political spectrum.
Right, of course.
Right. So I think honestly, like in my home, I have multiple guns kind of staged. And it's a good idea to know where they are and to have them accessible. Just in case, they decide, hey, I don't like your house being there. It's on stolen land.
Yeah.
I'm going to burn it.
Right. Jesus.
And you know what? That's not out of the realm of possibility. It's obviously a very small chance, maybe even a hypothetical hyperbole chance, but
I think it's extremist.
Right.
But
it is.
But there are extremists out there.
Right. People shining lights into people's windows saying, "Get out of your houses."
Right.
This isn't.
Yeah, don't get out. Just don't.
Yeah, no.
Don't even open. Don't open your window. Don't let them know that you're there.
Right.
That's the best thing you can do. Like, look, if this thing is happening right now and it's coming down, like, look, like close your blinds. Right. Not saying that you have to, hide yourself in your house, but close your blinds. Don't make it obvious that you're there, because chances are, if you're not there, they're not going to try and get anything out of you. They're not going to try and get a rise out of you. And I think it's kind of like a lot of what it is they're going to try and threaten you to the point where you feel like you are in danger and you have to do something. And then it kind of adds into their narrative of like these people who like hate black people so much that now they're attacking Black Lives Matter protesters and people and it's like,
you don't want to play into their agenda.
Yeah, just don't.
As messed up as it sounds, you don't want to play into that.
Yeah.
Preserve your life, your family's life.
Exactly.
That should be the most important thing over any sort of political agenda that anybody from either side is pushing. Right. And to me, honestly, grabbing a shotgun or a rifle and having that ready at the house.
Yeah, I think a shotgun is one of the more effective.
It is, but I think
as far as home defense,
inside a home, I believe it is. But if you have to go outside of the home, the rifle.
In this situation, we're not going outside the home.
It depends, man. It depends. If people are storming your property and they're surrounding your house, you're talking at a good 20 yards, maybe.
I don't know. If people surrounded my house, I'm not going outside.
No, I'm not
That's
going
a bad
outside.
idea. But if you wanna, stand at the top of your staircase with a shotgun and hope that no one walks in that front door, breaks a window, and comes
I'm not
through.
playing Rambo. I'm not being some sort of machismo. These are things that people, oftentimes gun owners, have to think about.
They do.
The level of escalation, the threat levels that often you might find yourself in. And scenarios have played out where this has been the case.
Yeah.
Somebody bursts in the door and there's 5 people that enter.
Yeah. Right.
In New York State, you only have 10 rounds in your semi-automatic to deal with that.
God, yeah.
So
with a fixed mag.
Yeah, and that's again fixed mags. Oh, try reloading under stress through an ejection port.
Try reloading under stress in general. It's hard.
I know. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not military. I don't have that kind of training, and to me, just making it anything easier for you to be able to use that firearm effectively is the best option.
Right.
So, am I going to choose an SKS to defend my house with over an AR? No, probably not. An AK, I'm pretty good with an AK. Right. And I think we could make that work in some instances, but it just makes it, I want all the advantages that I can get over a group of people that might want to do me harm.
Right. So I guess the biggest thing is, don't go out to these protests. Don't go out to these riots, especially if like a protest is one thing, right? If these protests, because in New York City,
during the daytime, they're not really an issue.
In New York City, they start out as protests, and once the protesters go home, they turn into riots.
When the sun goes down,
protest, do your thing. You should be doing your thing. You should.
Your constitutional right.
When the sun goes down, nothing good happens.
When
so
when things start turning hairy, you don't want to be a part of that.
Yeah. So look, exercise your rights. Be responsible about it as well. Going further than that, if you're looking to just stay neutral and not have to even worry about it, I would say don't wear any MAGA gear. Don't wear Trump gear if it's going to be a trigger point for people. I mean, it sucks to say, but
I find that people often want that confrontation to somehow get into it. They want to argue with people. They want that.
Yeah, potentially.
And you know what? We're not telling people not to support whatever candidate they want, but just like I said, be aware that you're going to have some shit probably come your way from people.
Right. So do it if you want, but just be prepared mentally that you might get some friction. Right. So that's another thing. And I think most people know that. And I think, people they do it just because they want it, I mean, you're not driving around with MAGA stickers and all that shit. I'm not driving around with MAGA stickers and all that. Pretty much nobody I know anyone who I know who is a Trump supporter, they might have Trump gear at home, but they're not going out in public and wearing it just because, I mean, really at the end of the day, do you want to deal with that? With everything else going on in your life, do you really want another reason for someone to bother you?
Right.
I don't personally. Right. So, and then if you're gonna be in a situation where you need to defend yourself, I would stay home, and in a worst case scenario, get yourself at least a shotgun.
Yeah, at least at a very minimum.
Yeah, at least a shotgun. And for those of you out there, I'm sure most of you have firearms, but if you're getting into the firearm arena, a shotgun for at least personal defense within your home is probably.
It's a great option.
It's probably the first thing. If you're concerned about home defense, that's going to be, in my opinion, it's probably going to be the first thing you're going to buy. Right. It's going to be, Mossberg sells a very inexpensive option.
Yeah, the Maverick line. It's very cost effective. The ammunition is relatively affordable.
Right.
And honestly, inside of a home, it's not going to over penetrate like a rifle is.
I mean, you can put, birdshot in it, and you could still you could pepper somebody, but it's not going to go through your walls, though.
You don't want to use birdshot, John. Just use buckshot. Don't use slugs.
I don't know because buckshot, yeah. I guess that's what I really meant. Buckshot. Yeah, because you don't want to use slugs because that can go through a wall and kill somebody.
Yeah, and especially if you live, let's just say, in a row house or an apartment, you don't want to have to deal with the liability of having somebody next door.
Yeah, I guess buckshot's is big enough to put a hurt on somebody, but not necessarily big enough to go through a wall and kill somebody.
I mean, it might go through a wall, but if it hits a stud, it's not going to go through a stud.
Yeah,
and it's honestly a very effective tool at close range.
Yeah.
As everyone well knows. And it's not like in the movies where it's just big, blast and the guy's going to fly back. It's not like that.
God. People who just watch the movies. Well, I mean, where you have a revolver that shoots 6 rounds or 8 rounds, but somehow they never reload and they shoot 30. Yeah, it's not the way the world works.
Herschel's shotgun in The Walking Dead, the never-ending shotgun.
Yeah. This is one of those things, man.
Right.
But I guess that's really it. I mean, yeah, it sucks to sit here and be like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. But what are you supposed to do?
Right.
You don't want to end up like Kyle Rittenhouse.
No.
You really don't.
No.
And I think that he shouldn't have been there at the end of the day, but neither should the people of rioting.
Right.
They shouldn't have been there either.
Right.
So that's kind of, it kind of evens itself out. Neither of them should have been there.
Right.
And if Kyle wasn't there, then people can argue if Kyle wasn't there, not only would he not be in trouble, but the people wouldn't be dead. And it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. But also if the people who were there rioting stayed home, they wouldn't be dead. And also if they didn't attack him.
Right.
So damn, it's just such it's a sticky situation.
It is. And more stuff's going to come out. More stuff's going to develop from this. And it's just going to be one of those things where we're going to learn a lot more about it in time. Just like any other shooting, just like any other police-involved shooting, we're going to learn more about it in time.
Yeah. It's a rough situation.
It is.
But try and stay safe, because honestly, going out and making a point is not worth your safety, because these people who are out there are looking to hurt people.
Right. They're looking to hurt people. They're looking to cause chaos and destruction.
Yeah.
They're looking for societal upheaval.
Yeah.
And, like I said, just look at what happened in China.
Right. And as a lot of you probably realize, this is going to be happening until the election.
Yes.
So, and hopefully, and most likely, right, once whoever's elected, if it's Trump, then there might be a couple more issues for a short time, but, whoever's elected, whatever, this stuff will eventually go away. And
if the Democrats win magically, it's going to stop. That's my prediction.
Well, it'll stop instantly.
Yeah. Instantly.
And if Trump,
racism will end.
Right, and if Trump wins, then it might go on for a little longer.
If Trump wins, people will think the Third Reich is here.
Well, I don't think that there's going to be necessarily riots. I think there'll be a lot more protests.
I think there's going to be riots.
There weren't riots when he won the first time.
No, but considering everything that's going on, it's going to be, if he wins, it's going to be a rigged election. If he wins, it's going to be, people are going to cry fraud. If he wins, people are going to cry collusion again. Yeah. It's going to be this whole thing. And now,
I have no doubt he's going to get impeached again by the Dems. Just because
people are going to think the election's rigged. People are going to think that democracy is no longer. People are going to think that, how could somebody like him win? Well, because we don't want Creepy Joe and Chameleon Kamala.
It's funny because people say, well, there's really not a lot of Trump supporters. They're the silent majority,
right?
And people are even saying that New York is in play right now, which it might very well be. I think it's a long shot.
People are tired of the Democratic narrative. They're tired of the controlling. They're tired of the, if you do this, you're wrong. If you do this, you're the problem of society.
Yeah, and I think they went kind of too far this election cycle. They turned, and this is, I know people personally. They pushed too far on this one, and they have turned lifelong Democrats into Republicans, at least for this election.
Yeah.
I know for a fact. I've heard them say it to me, and these are like older people. I'm talking like years, like 30, 40 years of being a Democrat, and they are now no longer Democrats. They are Republicans, at least for this this election. So I mean, I think they went too far.
I believe so as well.
People will say to me like, well, how do you know? I'm like, not that it's the be all end all, but if you go on Instagram right now, right? Do you have open Instagram? Because I want you to do this, because
you can also follow us on Instagram at NYGunGuys.
So go to the search for tags.
NYGunGuys.
Go to search for tags.
Yeah.
Type in Biden 2020.
Let's see, Biden 2020.
In the tags, and click tags. How many tags are there? There's a little number.
214,000.
Right, that's the very top tag, right?
Yes.
Type in Trump 2020.
Okay. Let's see, Trump 2020.
And how many are there?
2.8 million.
It's a lot more, man.
It is.
And obviously that's not saying, well, Trump's going to win because of that, but I mean, that's just something that people don't, people are out, and people will say, well, like, Trump supporters aren't they're not telling people they're Trump supporters because they're scared. If that's the case, and there's still 2.7 million versus 200,000 tags, I mean, every single tag is somebody supporting,
making an effort to type in.
Right. So that's sketch.
It is.
I mean, it's not saying that that's going to be the result of the election, but I mean, it's just another, like, one of those little tiny metrics where it's like, hey, people are saying that they're going to support Trump. Right. 2.7 million tags, and then versus 200 and something thousand.
That's a lot of racists, John.
Oh God. No.
So many racists.
Oh God.
All right.
Yeah, I'm not getting into that, but. So I guess that's really what it is. I'm sure this
ran a little long today.
Yeah,
but
I mean
think
this episode might catch a little flack because we're telling people to stay home. Like as far as
not
riots,
wear their political gear. We're not telling you not to, but what we're telling you is that you make a choice in life, and there are going to be things that might happen to you.
Yeah, there are.
And we believe in democracy, and we believe in the Constitution, and we would never want to tell anyone, hey, don't fly that flag, don't wear that, don't go protest. But in today's climate, sometimes things that you might do with good intentions are going to give you some shit.
With everything you do, there's going to be a reaction on the other side. Yes. And you potentially might have to deal with it face to face one day. And I mean, you could see videos of people getting Trump flags stolen off their house.
Yeah,
I mean, why? Not that I've never seen a Biden flag, but I don't think Trump supporters are going to go steal a Biden flag. Why do they want that anyway?
Right.
But it's happening. So it's interesting.
All right.
But I guess that's it for today, Taylor. Yes. I know you got to run.
Yeah.
I'm off today, so I got
stuff
nothing to do.
But gotta go run around and play with some airplanes. But John, excellent talk. Next episode, maybe we'll get back into some guns.
What I would like you to do is bring, because we talked about China today, bring the first gun that got you into everything was the Chinese SKS. I want you to bring that next time. Let's talk about that, because you can kind of get into the history. You got into it a little bit today, but it might be cool for you to get into the history.
I could also bring some Chinese paraphernalia. I collect a lot of military. I have the Red Guard armbands. I have bayonets. I have books, pictures.
That's cool. So I'll bring a box of shit, and we'll put it up on the Instagram and whatnot.
Chinese takeout.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that'd be good too.
All right, John.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Appreciate you sticking out the longer episodes. So much appreciated, and we'll see you next time.
Stay safe.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening to today's episode at the NYGunGuys podcast. We do release a new episode every Monday. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at NYGunGuys. Please give us a like, a follow, and a share. If you have any feedback or a suggestion for a future episode, definitely send us an email at info@nygunguys.com. We'll see you next time. Be safe out there.